Greetings. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View. On tonight's show, Tanya Lozano, founder of Healthy Hoods, will discuss her nonprofit organization and how it is helping Black and Brown communities close the gap through fitness, health, food programs, and services. Next, weekly contributor Dr. Akili speaks on vaccine passports and mandatory vaccinations. And finally, Eddie Harris, writer and executive producer, joins us to talk about his new film, Steps, released this year. Before we delve into the top news, let's do a recap on the current events we've covered recently. On yesterday's broadcast, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad spoke with Minister David Muhammad and Zakia Sankara Jabbar about the guilty verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial and what might be next in the process.
Some are still saying that it's too early for Black folks to be celebrating the conviction, because he may be given a lighter sentence than expected. So, Sister Zakia, what are your thoughts about that? Should Black folks be cautious about the celebration that we're seeing?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that it's okay. Like, let Black people celebrate for a minute. Like, we are constantly under siege. You know what I'm saying? I'm clear that, we still have sentencing, but I will say this for the folks who are on the front lines and working in these communities every day that are constantly under siege from these race soldiers in our community. It's okay for them to. I'm not here to tell people not to celebrate and to always just, have your warrior mode on. It's cool. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I think that, yes, of course, we would be, remiss if we weren't cautious about the time, that this individual should get. The other thing that I'm also looking for is that I believe he needs to be put in general population, no special treatment. Like, we know he going to jail, you feel me? But no special treatment. I mean, the prosecution needs to be clear about that. Ain't nothing special about you. You killed somebody, you have been found guilty of 3 different charges, you go on the general population, period.
Willie Muhammad also spoke with guest Minister David Muhammad and Zakia Sankara Jabbar about the recent shootings going on during the same time as Chauvin's guilty verdict was announced.
The unfortunate incident that has taken place with our sister who there in Columbus, Ohio, has already sparked much debate, not just in America, but also within the Black community about whether or not the shooting was justified. Just what are your perspectives on the whole shooting?
Well, as a Muslim, I would say that by the fact that it was a female makes it additionally disgusting to the extrajudicial arbitrary executions carried out of our people. By the fact that it was a woman actually speaks more into the lack of humanity of the perpetrators who carry out these heinous crimes. The Columbia Law School had put out a paper in 2015 entitled Black Girls Matter, pushed out, over-policed, and underprotected. And they, through their extensive research, highlighted a school-to-prison pipeline with our girls. And they spoke to the inordinate proportion of Black girls who are expelled from schools. And that there's this perception of our girls in the same way that there's a perception of our males. One commentator used the phrase that they see when the police are about to kill a Black man, that they see them as superhuman in a subhuman way.
Student Minister David Muhammad discussed the plots against Black youth in America and his recent book about Black youth.
What specifically inspired you to write a book talking about Black youth being at risk? And what are you hoping that this book accomplishes?
The topic that I selected for my PhD research at the University of the West Indies. And it started off as a master's thesis looking at juvenile delinquency. But then we drew the conclusion that anyone who ends up in criminal gang activity or breaking the law habitually in general and ending up in the prison after living a lifestyle of criminality, that it would in some way be connected to juvenile delinquency. No one comes from a stable home, well cultured, properly educated, and brought up with the appropriate type of training at age 18 makes a turnaround decision to become a criminal gang member or to begin to engage in some kind of negative culture like that. So it starts off with the home. And then we determine that there are 6 main causal factors of juvenile delinquency, which will eventually usher an individual into criminal gang activity, which were, first of all, broken homes, faulty parenting, and dysfunctional families, in particular, the dimension of absentee fathers being the most impacting causal factor or independent variable.
On Sundays, I Have a Testimony, Willie Muhammad interviewed our sister, Yanashda Longwood, about the genesis of her revolutionary spirit and the stories and experiences of her mother.
Can you share with us just the genesis of your revolutionary spirit?
You know, I was born with my fist up. My late mother, Juanetta Lone Wolf, was a part of the American Indian movement, and she was there was a protest of the called the Longest Walk, and it was a protest from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington D.C. in 1977, 1978. And so what I ended up, my mother basically was protesting and did that walk with from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington, D.C. That's how Chief Ernie Longwalker got his name, is because he walked. It was Ernie Peters, but then they gave him a name of Longwalker because he walked from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington, D.C. So I was born in Washington, D.C. And so when I was in my mother's womb, I was hearing all of these chants. I was hearing the prayer songs and all of that. And so I literally was born with my fist up, born into a movement. And I think that that's where I get my spirit, where it comes from, is because of what I was hearing and experiencing in my mother's womb during during that time.
Sister Yanashda Longwood also shared her experiences of being taken in by the family of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his qualities of humility, patience, love, and commitment.
You like, what testimony can you give that can give regarding the minister's love and commitment to our indigenous family?
You know, I think that with him he knows what all oppressed people of the world looks like, feels like. He loves our people, period. And with that, you know, I think that he's able to speak from a point of view of his own trials and what he has seen, what he has been through. And I've been on tour with him, and I've been to places throughout my entire life, and seeing him speak to the Native American youth, you know, he's able to speak to the hearts and the spirit of the people. And I think that that is something that we can all learn from. You know, some people say they love our people, but they do not understand our people. They don't understand the spirit. They don't understand the heart of the people. So they just speak it. And then, but in regards to, he doesn't. He's actually feels, you know, now they have a terminology of empath, you know. And I believe that he's always been very empathetic to he's always been able to feel people because he sees the God in them, even when they don't see it in themselves.
NNV anchor Robert Muhammad's guest on the Al Asir report was Minister Aman Muhammad, who discussed Farrakhan Speaks, the time and what must be done, how America has become an armed camp.
Question: why do you think in America there's such an infatuation with guns and violence?
Well, you know, brother, America, as we mostly know, America is a nation that was built on violence. built literally on bloodshed. So there has always been the elevation of violence and to solve problems, not through deliberative dialogue, but through fighting. So that is literally what the United States of America is built upon, and it seeps through everything, especially the educational system. And so, since we've been here, this is all that we have learned, that we should solve our problems with violence. And that is what we're seeing today.
For the How to Eat to Live segment, Robert Muhammad talked with NNV contributor Charles Muhammad about vegetable selection.
Should there be concerns of too many genetically modified foods in the food supply?
At this particular time, in the United States, genetically modified foods have been creeping into the food supply. But we must first be specific on the genetic modification of foods, because natural genetic modification of foods does occur in nature. Now, the carrot, for instance, has a variety of sizes and colors, but that doesn't mean that man artificially went in and started injecting certain dyes or genetic material into the vegetables to make them change color or texture or size. Sometimes it's the adaptation element of life itself. It finds a way. And then finding a way, it adopts sometimes aspects of it, if it's of its environment, or it develops new characteristics that helps it set apart itself in survival techniques. So in essence, modification genetically is natural, but what we don't want is the artificial genetic modification.
NNV anchor Tariq X and contributor Nina Shabazz discussed a recent interview with Valerie A. Campbell, a 3-time published author and relationship coach advising women on how to attract the right man.
We did get into a little bit more of the specific details and how she came up with her specific formula, and just kind of what curated her particular platform. And this is what she was telling me.
I'm a data and energy coach, and how I got started was really, I didn't know, or I struggled with how to relate to men because I was brought up in a household where love really wasn't demonstrated. And so I went on a personal search, a personal development search to really find out about myself. And on that journey, I came across the law of attraction. And as the universe would have it, I landed in a job where I was surrounded by 120 men. I was the only female, the only black female at that. And throughout that 10-year period, I worked with these guys and I would literally just interact with them. It was my teaching ground on how to relate to men. And they would confide their secrets with me because I was actively interested in, how do you attract and keep a man? I would actively ask them the question of the day. And sometimes they would share their secrets with me and say, Valerie, we'd be banned from the round table for sharing this with you. And so I acquired all of this knowledge and I would share it with my girlfriends. And as they implemented what I had passed on, their relationships would change.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Weekly contributor Dr. Akili gives us insight on vaccine passports when we return. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds. Online education. Helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small but significant steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As vaccine passports and immunity passes are being required, there are concerns that unvaccinated people will be restricted from travel and access to services.
We like to use the term digital health passes because I think it's the most accurate. Passports, while there is an international dimension of this, we're also using them to regulate within a country. And in some ways, I think licensing might be this better word, in the idea that to drive a car, you have to show that you're not going to pose a danger to yourself or others. And when these are used properly, it's to make sure you're not going to pose a danger to yourself or others because of COVID-19.
And that concept of the digital health pass obviously addresses, one of the concerns that we're already seeing about, counterfeiting of these little low-tech white cards. Is that the case?
Yeah, so the United States is in some ways behind many of our peer countries in our ability to track vaccination, to be perfectly honest. We are currently giving these little white cards, and there's already been online auctions for blank ones and forgeries, and the hope would be with a better digital infrastructure, we'd be able to guard a little bit against that. But so far, the White House hasn't taken leadership on trying to build that infrastructure. So I think for the time being, those white cards are going to act as at least a first-order proof of vaccination.
Joining us to discuss this is NNV contributor, Dr. Akili Muhammad. Greetings.
Greetings, ma'am. How are you?
Good, good. Why do you think the states and the government need to have vaccine cards if they are sure that the vaccines work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because for those who may not know, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine have never guaranteed against people transmitting nor catching the coronavirus. So it's interesting to me that we would have a vaccine passport when there isn't a place that people are comfortable with the vaccines, in that we have the ability to stop wearing masks, stop social distancing, and the threat of this the threat of this infection passing from person to person has not decreased, as we have seen a rise in the numbers recently. And so I think it's interesting for those reasons, in that if you're going to delineate a person who has been vaccinated from one that hasn't, and then start to make restrictions on the person who has not been vaccinated, what is that based on? Because it's definitely not based on whether or not the person has the ability to pass on an infection or not.
Right. Now, on a state level, we see that there's a difference between California, Texas, and New York. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because a lot of people talk about these three states as being the leaders in certain things. Like when typically you have any type of healthcare related mandates that spread across this country, a lot of times they start in New York and California. I won't say they always are the leaders, but typically New York or California tend to be the leaders in some of these national projects when it comes to healthcare. And then over the years, Texas has been one of those type of states that always shows its independence and kind of is that like standalone, kind of rebellious type state in a lot of different situations over the years. And so when we look at the governor of Texas, who made a statement that there weren't going to be any mandates, there weren't going to be any forcing of anything, whereas California and New York are both talking about what it would look like to have a vaccine passport, or even if it's just similar to your little tracking that you have, or I should say the little the screenshot that you take when you're going on an airplane. Both of them are talking about having that type of situation where people have to show that in order to get into situations where there are a lot of people, gatherings, sporting events, concerts, things of that nature. But it was interesting in one of these articles I was reading about California, where they potentially will allow people that are vaccinated to sit close to each other, or they said shoulder to shoulder, versus those who have not been vaccinated would have to sit in a separate area and they would have to social distance. So again, those are very interesting ideas when there has been no proof, no guarantee that these vaccines will stop the spread of this infection.
Right. Now, do you think that mandatory vaccinations speak to something other than healthcare?
I do, and that's the reason what I just said. The fact that there is no proof that the Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Moderna, nor the Pfizer vaccine, none of the four can purport any information since they've released it to the public, or even in their studies before they release it to the public, can they say that this vaccine is going to keep people from catching the infection nor spreading the infection. So how can you have a person that's vaccinated be in a different situation from a public perspective than a person who's not vaccinated? We literally have people that are fully vaccinated that are still walking around with masks on. They're still social distancing, and they're still trying to limit their time in the public. So what was the purpose of the vaccine? With the potential effects negatively that these vaccines have had on people, the real question to a lot of people is what has been the benefit? But when it comes to mass vaccination, and it comes to being able to or not being able to go in certain public events with or without a vaccine, there has to be some other reason, because it just doesn't make sense that as far as keeping people from infecting other people, that could not be the main reason.
Right. And what are your thoughts on these and other measures like this becoming more intrusive? We're seeing, like you said, we have the vaccine, we have the cards. You may or may not be able to travel. What other measures do you think our government would take?
Yeah, that's another very interesting question. And I would say, the statement that the governor of Texas produced, in it, he discussed not having certain organizations enforce on people that they would have to have the vaccine in order to get some of the typical, I would say, needs filled like they typically do. So he didn't go in specifics, but the way I read it, I was thinking housing, food stamps, typical medical care, things of that nature. He made a statement that there wouldn't be a force against people who didn't have a vaccine. It would be their choice whether they did or they didn't. But the fact that he mentioned it, there have been a lot of conversations, of course, since this pandemic has started. And so those are the type of things that make me feel that is a potential that these things may happen. And of course, we will have to be prepared to deal with it when it happens.
And finally, long term, do you think these measures are a precursor to more of these types of policies, possibly in other areas aside from health, maybe something such as business, work? What do you think about what this means to us long term?
Yeah, so the Methodist hospital system in Houston has sent out a notification to all of their employees that I think the date is June 7th, that all of the employees have to be vaccinated or they will be released from work for 2 weeks without pay. And if they don't get the vaccine in those 2 weeks while they're out of work, then they would be fired from the company. And so that is kind of what I see as some of the potential companies making it mandatory. And of course, some of them have the right to do things different than the state or the federal mandates when it's a private company. You know, it depends on how the company is set up. But those are the things that I am concerned about, not necessarily for myself, but because the general public is really anxious about these type things. But my suggestion would be that we have to really lean on our faith because, you know, for those of us who are Muslims, we're on day 15 of Ramadan and we're reading in the Quran. Over the last few days, we're reading about Lot and Abraham and Shuab and Midian. And we're looking at all of these different areas of the world and all of these different prophets that did not fall victim to the plot of the oppressor. And so I think it's time for us to not get ourselves so concerned in what these people are doing. Because as I just finished saying, if you're going to make vaccines mandatory, if you're going to make coming into certain arenas or certain public places mandatory, and you have to show that you've been vaccinated, then there's something else behind that because you can't prove that your vaccine will protect people from getting infected. And so when an enemy of God produces that type of plan to oppress people, God already has a way out for us. And so I would just say to those that are paying attention to these type of mandates that potentially could be coming, just stay faithful, because at the end of the day, if we continue to strive to be righteous and we continue to strive to be God's children, he always has a way for his people to make it out. And that's what the scriptures teach us. And that's where we should have our confidence.
Perfect. Thank you again. And as always, Dr. Akili, for joining us and speaking to us about this serious situation we have going on here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. We'll be right back. When we return, Tanya Lozano will be joining us to discuss her organization, Healthy Hood Chicago. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Healthy Hood is closing the gap in the life expectancy of Black and Brown communities with an emphasis on global transformation to fitness, health, safety, and food.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Healthy Hood's PE class. Class is in session. This is our second class of our second series. What's up, Brave Mugs? Nice to see you, brother. This is the second class of the second series. Last week we heard from Professor Dr. Prexy Nesbitt. He gave us a lesson on the South African Freedom Charter, and that was super, super awesome. A common thing that we've been learning throughout this PE series, right, even just from the one class that we've taken, is how we need to think more globally and make relationships with people in other countries, other professionals in other health systems, in government and activism and all of that, if we're going to be able to just really start the revolution that our world needs, which is a global transformation. We don't just need a transformation here in this country. We really do need a global transformation. And that essentially is what our planet Earth is telling us.
Joining us is founder of the nonprofit Healthy Hood Chicago, Tanya Lozano. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. As founder of Healthy Hood, a community-based nonprofit organization, how have you incorporated your experiences? I've learned that you're a dance instructor, an activist, and an athlete. Has that helped shape Healthy Hood?
Yes, absolutely. I always say that me and my siblings were struggle kids because both of my parents were activists. My mother, Emma Lozano, is an immigration activist. My father, Reverend Slim Coleman, was active in the civil rights movement with SNCC, very active in the election of our first African-American mayor here in Chicago, Harold Washington. He was a member of the Rainbow Coalition of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. So we say in our family that, revolutionary blood runs in our veins just as we come out the womb. I was an athlete. I guess to say once an athlete, always an athlete. I played basketball all the way through college. And that really transitioned me into the fitness industry, which, like a lot of athletes of color, it's an easy profession to go into if you've been in sports your whole life. And it definitely has shaped the work of Healthy Hood, right? I realized when I was getting this kind of education in the fitness industry that this was not the kind of education that our people had access to in the underserved communities of Chicago. And so the activist in me, thought, like, how do we put this into play in terms of creating a social justice and a community approach to what health and wellness looks like for our Black and Brown communities? Perfect.
Now, speaking of the community approach, does Healthy Hood partner with other grassroots organizations?
Yes, we partner with really anyone, but we have an emphasis and an intention on creating space for Black and Brown, specifically Black and Brown organizations to collaborate, because we believe that we're stronger when we are in unity. But we've worked with everyone from Trap House Chicago on the South Side to the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Humboldt Park. We've worked with the Nation of Islam. We've had Minister Ishmael Muhammad on our PE segments. And we just really want to keep that door open so that we can build these bridges in order to be more impactful.
Perfect. And now, how does your organization and your partners helping to close the gap between the life expectancy of affluent communities and the communities of our Black and Brown youth?
Right. So firstly, just making sure that people are aware that this life expectancy exists, right? Specifically in Chicago, the life expectancy gap is 20 years. 20 years difference between affluent communities, which are predominantly white, and communities of color in Chicago. And so teaching our people, number one, that this disparity exists and that we should be angry about it. Because sometimes you got to get a little angry to put things into action. And then obviously we take a really holistic approach to this. We understand, just like the Cuban healthcare system understands, that when you are assessing someone of their health, that it doesn't solely rely on what their physical symptoms are, right? We have to talk about what the political climate, what role that's playing, the education system, access to food and water, what their financial situation is, because this all affects our health. And because we live in a capitalist society, right, healthcare, just like every other system in this country, is very compartmentalized, it's privatized, its healthcare system specifically is controlled by big pharma. So there's no real communication system between the different levels of healthcare that exist. And so what we do is we really try to take an approach that is similar to the Cuban healthcare system, where we assess the health of our people based on all of these different things that affect their health as people of color living in a capitalist country, dealing with the political things that are going on specifically towards our community, and then finding what are the resources that our people need. A lot of times it is access to healthy food. And a lot of times it's the bare minimum, right? It's like access to healthy food, access to safe places for their children to play, not fearing that they're going to get deported or murdered at the hands of the police. All of these things have to do with our healthcare, with our healthcare, right? And so we started this vacuna campaign in the midst of the pandemic, where all of these people that were seeking a vaccine, because our people were dying at such disproportionate rates from the pandemic because they had these underlying pre-existing conditions, we said, if you really want this vaccine, we're going to help you find it. But before we do that, we need you to come in. We need to take your blood pressure. We need to take your blood sugar, and we need to do a proper assessment of what these conditions are that you're living in that's contributing to you falling victim to all of these health problems, right? And so we started that campaign in the midst of the pandemic, and we're really just kind of growing on that. All of the other resources that we provide just kind of piggyback on that initial mission, which is, fitness, lifestyle, food. It's not as easy for our community as it is for affluent communities. And so how do we make that just easier to access, more fun, more culturally relevant? And so those are the kind of services we offer at Healthy Hood Chicago.
Perfect. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, has impacted Black and Brown communities at a disproportionate rate, affecting our health, safety, food, and jobs. You've named some of the services that you have assisted the community with. Can you speak to us more about what We Got Us is?
Yeah, sure. So We Got Us is an initiative that started at the beginning of the pandemic. And the reason we call it We Got Us is because we had realized from before, because of the 20-year life expectancy gap, that the systems in place were never built for us. They were broken at their inception because they were never made to include Black and Brown people to begin with. And so we knew that we could not rely on those systems, or even to hope and wait for those systems to fix themselves, right? Because they're broken. They were always broken. They had no intention on including us. And so We Got Us was a way to say, we have to figure it out on our own, because we're dying at disproportionate rates, and we will continue to do so unless we figure it out, because the systems in place are not going to do it for us, right? And so it started off really as, to be honest, I really just made a call on my social media and said, this is what we need to do. So whoever has these skills and resources, step up to the plate. Ain't nobody doing nothing else right now. The pandemic is going on. We're on lockdown. We need you right now. Our community needs you. And that was people who had access to grocery stores that hadn't been looted. And because at the time that was what was going on in our communities. We had no groceries in our grocery stores, or they were closed. Remember, after the assassination of George Floyd. So people who had access to food, people who had access to PPE, which at a time it was like, I felt like we were slinging PPE. It was like, an underground thing because it was so hard to get. So it was even harder for Black and Brown people to get it. And then once we figured out how to get testing, or that testing was happening, but it wasn't easily accessible to our communities, we demanded that they become accessible to our communities and started these pop-up testing sites with CORE and Rainbow Push. And so those are some of the things that we did during the pandemic to combat this disproportionate death rate, or this death toll that was affecting our communities.
Now, the pandemic has also restricted the ways that people can gather and interact with each other. And I know your organization was in the communities. How has that affected your services?
To be honest, I will say that before the pandemic hit, we had a solid group of volunteers. But because of the circumstances, we actually we came to a different level. People were so much more willing to help because things were just so visibly bad. The pandemic was bad. Then, the assassination of George Floyd, and then Breonna Taylor, and even just a couple of weeks ago in in Little Village, which is just the neighborhood over from us. A 13-year-old boy was shot and killed by a police officer. The boy's name was Adam Toledo. So all of these things were happening, and I think the energy was there just in general in Chicago for people to help and just get out on the streets and want to be a part of just saying something against what was going on. And so we did really well. We ended up recruiting about 1,500 volunteers over the course of that year, 2020. And with those steady volunteers, we've been able to consistently keep these, what we call survival programs going, right? Which is we do a food pantry twice a week. We still delivering to 500 families biweekly, sustaining them. We have a garden where we grow all of our own produce. We have fitness classes. We're starting kids programming this summer. So it really was, there was just more people willing to be revolutionaries, right? And so we took advantage of that the most that we can, because, you know, this is heavy work. And, you know, it's easy to get burnt out. So now that we have a bigger pool to pull from, we don't feel like we have to demand too much of any one person, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. Now, speaking of the food pantry, how do people access the Healthy Hood Food Pantry?
Yeah, so it's every Tuesday and Thursday starting at 11 a.m. at Healthy Hood. Our headquarters is at 2242 South Damon. It's headquartered out of a church. It's actually my parents' church, Lincoln United Methodist Church. So any Tuesday and Thursday, you can come by and get groceries. Tuesdays, we usually have these kind of bag lunches. On Thursdays, we have really beautiful boxes of produce. So depending on what it is that you prefer, if you want both, you know, it's open to anyone that comes by. You don't even have to get out of your car. You can just drive by, honk your horn, and somebody will take it to your car.
Now, well, there is a certain demographic in the population, the elderly. Does Healthy Hood offer delivery services for the elderly and for vulnerable population?
Yeah, so we specifically have been sustaining one of the senior homes here, the one that's nearest to our headquarters. And then obviously, actually, to be honest, a lot of the people who come and pick up their food are also seniors. We've been trying to take care of them, but the truth is the seniors are not the only ones struggling right now, you know, and I think they got highlighted, right, a lot because they were more vulnerable to the virus in the beginning. But our Black and brown communities are struggling in general. We have these pre-existing conditions, diabetes, hypertension, asthma. These are the reasons why the COVID-19 virus takes our lives. It's not technically the COVID virus. It's the fact that our immune systems are low because we don't have access to healthy food. We don't get to prioritize our fitness or things like that because of all of the systemic issues we have to deal with, right, as people of color. So, you know, we do things for the seniors, but we want to make sure that all of our Black and brown communities know that we are a resource for them.
Now, you have such a great spirit and you have done a lot, especially last year and during a pandemic. How can people donate and support the organization?
Yes, so you can please donate. We actually didn't get refunded this year, which was really sad for us. We did everything we were supposed to do from the state and we didn't get refunded. So all of the work that we've been doing have been just from kind of in-kind partnerships, like the food that we get in are these in-kind partnerships that we have, and none of our volunteers or anyone gets paid to do this work. So we do need as many donations as possible. You can donate to Healthy Hood via our website. Our website is healthyhoodchi.com. And you can hit the donate tab and go ahead and donate there.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Tanya. I appreciate learning all about Healthy Hood Chicago. Please donate if you can. Thank you for joining us, and we'd love to have you back.
Yes, anytime. Thank you so much.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, Eddie Harris, writer and executive producer, speaks on his new film, Steps. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App, NNV News.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "How much more can we stand?" The painful death of Dante Wright, the traumatic death of George Floyd, and the Derek Chauvin murder trial in Minnesota brings into focus how fragile Black life remains, and the constant, elusive, and almost non-existent giving of justice to Black people. How much loss can we stand? And have we had enough? This FCN volume number 28 edition features the middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled The Intensifying Universal Cry for Justice. To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune into the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Steps is a story of trauma, alcoholism, recovery, redemption, and love that is allowing us to see ourselves and understand our unique human struggles.
Let's go to the hospital, baby. Damn right, you'll never touch me again. You gave them something to lift up the Bible.
You do that for me? Only if you're willing to do it for yourself.
Saying you're my homie. Me too. Yes.
At some point, you have to let go of the anger and pain.
What the hell did I do to you? You shot me. Not today, man. You ain't done with my watch.
We have the film's writer and executive producer, Eddie Harris, joining us today. Greetings, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. As the writer of the movie, can you tell us what exactly brought this subject to your attention? Why did you want to feature us dealing with trauma and addiction in this movie?
Well, Steps is a combination of real life stories that I've grown up listening to from family and friends and people in my community. I felt compelled to create a beautiful and a powerful story of hope, which would inspire others to share and join this journey, taking steps to recovery, forgiveness, redemption, and love. Steps was also an opportunity to keep people informed about issues that take place in life and build awareness in addiction, mental health, and relationships and other things.
So alcoholism leads to so many issues in the lives of our people. It affects relationship, it affects your health, your wealth, and our well-being. What are some of the messages we can take from this movie about alcoholism and recovery, redemption, and love?
The message in Steps we could take from the movie that in life we all struggle with things, and once you know about the value of struggle, you can improve yourself. Every day we wake up and we have a chance to make a change, and no matter how many times we fall, we can rise up again and lean on others for support. So that's the message. There's a lot of different things that go on in our community that I think in this movie we'll be able to relate to. Who doesn't relate to love, forgiveness, recovery, and redemption?
Now, how does this movie help us to see ourselves and to really understand our unique human struggles?
One thing about this film is I think that the characters are people who we don't normally see on screen often. And I think when you see it, you can identify with something in there, whether it's with redemption, whether it's with love, and all the other things, the messages. And like I said before, what I want you to walk away from this film realizing is that, when you get up every day, that's another day to set right the things that you don't feel are right going on in your life. You can make a change no matter how many times that you fall out. Excuse me.
Mm. Yeah, as the writer, again, you obviously need funding for your projects. How did you get the funding for your film?
It was a long journey, but I never gave up. Funding came from a man named Michael Baumgartner, who was a dear friend of mine for 15 years, and he was also my landlord. And Mike believed in me, and he seen my struggle as a filmmaker trying to make this story a reality. He read the script, and he believed it would touch people. So he took the leap of faith and he joined into the journey of getting steps made. He ultimately, untimely passed away. But I take comfort knowing he had the chance to see the movie when it screened and was able to see how it touched people in the audience.
Perfect. Now, you said something very important. You had somebody who believed in you and helped you bring your dream to fruition. How did you get star athlete Shaquille O'Neal and other executive producers on this movie?
Well, Shaq, big fella, he came on board by way of his manager, Mike Paris, who's also one of the EPs on the film. And Mike and another gentleman by the name of Greg Ferguson and we have a production company called EMG1, which is also associated with the film. So Mike Paris, Uncle Mike, loved the concept, loved the message, and was able to bring Shaq on board as an executive producer as well.
Now, I received some information that Miss Pauletta Pearson Washington, Denzel Washington's wife, is an actor in the movie. Can you confirm whether or not that's true? And can you tell us about the cast and the crew of Steps?
Absolutely. Pauletta, she's in the movie. She plays Dr. Olivia. And it was an honor to have her a part of Steps. She's doing her thing now in the Genius with the Aretha Franklin story. And the film, it stars Rob Morgan, who's been in Just Mercy, Stranger Things, a few other things. Walter Fauntleroy, who's now on the Oval Office, the Oval with Tyler Perry. Robert McKay, Tia Dion Hodge, Eden Duncan Smith. We had so many other talented people in this film. They're definitely recognized.
Right. Now, how are you getting these heavy hitters? Is it your consistency, your hard work? Is it the relationship that you're building, your networking? What would you say has gotten the interest of these heavy hitters to join on with your film?
Well, I think that this industry is all about relationships. It's building those relationships, maintaining them. And also all of the talent, the great talent in this film was brought to me by our talented casting director. Her name is Pinwa. She saw something in all the actors. She put them in front of me. They auditioned, and it was, right away I knew these were the people that had to play these roles. So definitely the casting director and relationships.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing you mentioned earlier is that, the movie was based on some of the life experiences and some things that you have seen. What were some of your influences growing up? What got you how did you come across just identifying that you wanted to be a writer and a filmmaker?
Well, my father was my influence. Like so many other my friends, their fathers were regular guys who went to work every day and took care of their families while dealing with their own personal struggles. Those men were my inspiration for the main character, Brian. It's so many of these type of men in communities all over the world, but these role models hardly get to be seen on screen. It's a beautiful story, and I just felt like I wanted to tell a story where we could see the people that we see every day in our community on screen. Regular men taking care of their families, and just working through their issues and surviving.
Right. And finally, what are some of your other works? What else have you written, produced? When and where can we see your films, including Steps?
I've done a few projects over the years. Most notable, I'm the writer for House of Bodies. It's available on Netflix. It's with Queen Latifah, Terrence Howard, and Peter Fonda. And for Steps, I'm the writer, the EP, and the producer. And you can go to stepsthemovie.info to rent or buy the film. You can see it on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, YouTube, and other streaming platforms listed on the website. So it's stepsthemovie.info.
Stepsthemovie.info. I will be checking that out. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris, for joining us. And we look forward to more of your work in the future.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you for joining us today and tuning into NNV News, National Network News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.